Having me, guys.
Yeah, definitely. And our listeners who are listening right now, you'll hear a beautiful sound in the background. That is the sound of softballs being hit by a 14U team right now in training. So it's a beautiful sound.
I was just listening to it for a second. Sorry, I was taking it in. Hi, Karli. It's Tyler. It's a pleasure having you join us for this. I know we were excited to get you to come on here and talk because you got a lot of. We don't get often. We talk to people that do what you're doing now in a roundabout way, or they do it in pieces. But you kind of solely focused on this one part of the game that I think you can give a lot of insight to, because it's. I personally believe in softball or baseball that strength and conditioning is probably the biggest piece that's lacking in the game, top to bottom, honestly. Before we dive into all that, though, we always like to kind of start with your softball story. What softball was like growing up, and we talked to so many people. Some girls had to start out by playing t-ball. Their dad was working with them in the yard. They didn't know what to do. And then, transitioned into fast pitch, or they started with slow pitch and all that. So what was softball like for you growing up?
So whenever I was 5, I started playing t-ball, and from there on, just worked my way up, went into coach pitch. And it wasn't until I was a freshman in high school that I started playing travel ball. Up until then, it was all Little League, hometown. I don't know if y'all are familiar with pony ball or pony league, but I played that growing up and then finally got into travel ball.
So I have a question for you, because my wife was the same exact way. She never played fast pitch softball until she got into her freshman year. And for me, like, I played baseball my entire life, so I gradually was able to move up to that. What was that like? I mean, for you, what was the big difficulty for you going from playing t-ball to coach pitch to eventually baseball, or what was the biggest challenge for you to make that switch to finally go to fast pitch tournament at 9th grade?
The game was so fast. I felt like I was way behind and starting travel ball late, and I would never catch up to these kids. I just remember thinking, I'm the odd one out here. I'm small and slow, and the game is just moving so fast.
So you kind of just brought up your negatives. What were the positives? What is it that made you successful? You said you were small and slow. Were you the most intelligent? What was it that made you successful then to allow you to continue to keep doing it and not giving up? Because I think for a lot of people, a lot of leagues find it hard to keep younger kids engaged in the game, and a lot of them walk away before the game ever picks up with the speed and intensity that you're talking about.
Right. For me, it was without a doubt my work ethic. I think those negatives kind of shaped me as a player and made me form my own player development journey, which at the time I wasn't aware of. But looking back at it, it was somewhat of a player development journey that I embarked on.
So we've talked to a few people from Texas. I think most of the Texas people we talked to are in the baseball realm of things. But, you start travel ball 9th grade. What was the competition like? I mean, it's not like over here where we're cold. We're cold for 4 to 5 months a year, and then finally we can play baseball. What was it like over there for the competition for you?
It was surreal, crazy. So we played all throughout the fall, even played some in January, and then we would go straight into high school season. So everyone playing all the time made the competition that much greater. And with the travel ball team I was on, we were traveling to Florida, California, even in the fall. So it was like softball and then school, which is such a backwards way to think about it.
Well, on that note, how was it for you to separate the two, like softball and your studies? Because there's people listening now that would love to do that. They would love to go to Florida and play, and they live in Texas, or let's just say they live where we are right now. We're in Pennsylvania. So they love to go to Florida and play. They love to go to California and play, but at the same time, they got to be students. So how were you able to balance that?
It was really tough for me, actually. I'm a huge planner, so I would wake up 5 a.m, do homework, knock out everything, and then after school, I devoted all that time to lifting, hitting, any extra work that I had, and just try to accomplish getting all my homework done before any tournament could get started. That way, I called it softball time. As soon as I left for a tournament, I was on softball time, and school was essentially on the back burner.
Now let's talk a little bit about your high school playing and what that was like. Obviously, Texas has a great high school softball community. It's very tough and challenging. What was that experience like for you? And what were some of the struggles you had at the older age?
It was an awesome experience for me, and the fact that I grew up in small town Texas, so I'd been playing with those kids since I was 5. So all my best friends, and fortunately we were ranked every year in Texas, so we were playing the best of the best, which almost was like extended travel ball play with the competition that we were facing.
Right. Now, I'm curious, what made you decide the college that you ultimately, what was the biggest decision that made you choose that college? I mean, did they come out to some of your games and see you play, or is it you went for a visit and you just fell in love, or did you have friends that played there? How did that all come about to go to Hendrix?
It's actually a funny story. So I was in Colorado. I don't know if y'all are familiar with the Sparkler tournament.
I'm not.
Yeah.
It's a major recruiting tournament for softball. So it's in Colorado. You're there for a whole week. Everything from the Sparkler to the fireworks. I think they have several names now. And I was playing in the academic all-star game, but there's another all-star game going on to the side. And my friend was playing in the other all-star game. Well, the Hendrix coach came up to my friend's mom, who was the recruiter, and said, "Hey, do you have a catcher with a 4.0 GPA?" She goes, "I don't, but if you go to the academic all-star game, I know when he's playing, go watch her." And so typically my parents are in tune with the game. You can hear them. I mean, I can see them, but all I saw was my parents talking to this. I didn't even know who she was at the time, but it turned out to be the Hendrix coach. So I was so confused with what was going on. Get done with the game, come up to them. They're like, "Karli, this is a Hendrix coach, like awesome education. You can't turn this down." So basically my parents had already committed to Hendrix for me. And I was not in for it. I said, I don't want to go to Arkansas. I don't want to go to the middle of nowhere. I'm not going to visit. Well, my mom got her way. She got me on a visit. I fell in love with the campus. So it was a very small campus, but had awesome facilities. The environment was even better, and academics second to none. At the time, I was going to be pre-med and going to med school. So med school acceptance rate and academics couldn't beat that, and ultimately ended up committing there.
So now you get there, and it's the whirlwind, probably, right? You're on your own. You're independent. You've got to balance school, practice. A lot of it is dictated by the coach. What was that transition like? Were you nervous going into it, or did you just kind of go with the flow?
No, it was tough for me. It was tough in the sense that, like you said, there's a lot of moving parts, and I didn't know how to handle them. I had gone from high school to where I had time and I made time for everything, and I was on the schedule, to I'm a freshman in college. I don't really know what I'm doing, and I don't necessarily know how to make time for it. And so I struggled with finding time to lift, to do homework. And basically the first semester for me was a challenge in figuring out how I can do all the things that benefit me, both as a player and a person.
I have to ask the question because Tyler and I are both fathers of catchers. They're a weird breed, and I'm curious what makes a catcher a catcher. I mean, like my son is 7 years old, Tyler's 16, and it's just when you find out that your kid's a catcher, you understand, you see that it fits, but there's something different about a catcher. So it's a weird question to ask, but we've asked another catcher this before, and I love the answer. So what makes a catcher a catcher?
I think all catchers have this organic passion that they play with and this spark to lead. That's something I see among every catcher. They can lead instantly, but they also have the ability to just take a pitcher under their wing and be the mellow softness for them to fall when a game's not going their way. And the ability to balance those two things is just a phenomenal trait for every catcher.
Now, you pitched in college as well, correct?
No, actually, that was a ongoing joke that my college coach put on the website to throw everyone off.
Yeah, it threw me off because I'm like, you don't see that very often.
No.
Okay, all right. I wanted to ask.
Now, being a catcher, one thing I really want to ask you about, because I think it's important. It's something I've always I caught like one inning in my entire life and took a foul ball to the face and was like, that's enough. Never doing that again. But he gets beat up all the time. But I always talk about that relationship between pitcher and catcher and managing more than one pitcher. Sometimes you got 6, 7, 8 of them, depending on the team you're on. Where does that begin? Does it begin in the bullpen, off the field, lunchroom, dinner room? How do you grow that relationship between pitcher and catcher?
Oh, for sure, it's a off the field thing for me. So at Hendrix, we had my senior year, so many pitchers, and it's something that I found myself, I would be asking these girls to go to lunch with me and get to know them off the field. So I knew their personalities before we even stepped into the bullpen. I knew if they were having an off day, like, okay, we'll cut it off here. Or, hey, I can't really be tough on them because of X, Y, Z. So for sure, getting to know your pitcher before you can even know her as an actual pitcher.
Now, one thing I want to ask you, because it's never happened to me in life, is you call curveball, rise ball, whatever you call, and you get fastball, and you have that oh my god moment. What's that feeling like behind the plate?
Oh, the crossover feeling?
Yeah. Yes, the crossed up. You see it, and you could just the fear in the eyes when they zoom in with the camera is, obvious.
Oh, it's real. It's mainly, forget mechanics of blocking at that point. It's how do I stop this ball and not let it get past me?
So you were a 4-year starter, but Tyler and I, him and I get into conversations a lot because we both coach the same team. Finding your role in the team. Him and I have both played high school baseball, and we had a role in a team from freshman year on, but it changed. So your role from freshman year to senior year, did it change, or did you always have a similar role on the team?
I would say it definitely changed beginning of junior year. I went from quiet, I wouldn't really lead with my words, to junior year I was probably way outspoken, would take kids under my wing and really get to know kids off the field and then bring that onto the field. So definitely went from leading without speaking to being very verbal about it.
That's awesome.
Now, one thing I want to ask, as a player, as a catcher, everybody's looking at you. Body language is probably one of the most important things. It's hot.
Yep.
Arkansas, Texas, anywhere down there. The summers can be quite miserable. How do you maintain that focus, that energy level throughout the course of a weekend, and a college series, a tournament for a younger player? What are some of the tips that you can give younger players or even coaches and parents out there listening for catchers to maintain that high level of play?
Oh, for a catcher, I would just say you always have to remember that all eyes are on you on the field. Everyone's looking at you. So if you go down, if you show weakness, you have 8 other girls looking at you who are about to reflect that more than likely. So just remembering that you're the leader, so you can't go down.
Well, maybe I should ask this for Tyler asked this one, but this is a perfect question to be side by side with this one. So you talked about that strength there. You got to be the one that's kind of the rock for the team. What were some of your struggles that you had going through playing college ball? You were fairly new player to the sport because you only had played fast pitch travel ball for 4 years and high school ball for 4 years, and now all of a sudden you're playing college ball. What were some of those struggles you went through?
Injuries for sure. From freshman year on, both shoulders really just threw me for the role. I ended up tearing my rotator cuff in my right shoulder. And then right before senior season, I sublexed my left shoulder, ended up tearing that labrum. And both of those really tested me on a physical stamina and emotional stamina of getting back to the game. How do I do that? And not only how do I do that, but how do I keep my teammates around me and keep my teammates up in that process? Because, as soon as you go through something, you have all eyes on you.
Did you play while the labrum was torn?
I did.
Oh my goodness. And your shoulder stayed intact?
Yeah. So I actually did not find out my labrum was torn until October before my last season. It happened in August. The MRI, the first time didn't reveal anything. Went to get a second opinion because my arm kept getting stuck. Just laying down in normal positions would get stuck. And right away they told me it was torn. They would more than recommend surgery. I wouldn't play my last season. So I decided, you know what, I'm playing my last season. I'll figure it out and I'll make it. And luckily for me, I made it through the last season and no problems yet.
Wow.
That's insane.
That is crazy to me, honestly. I mean, I knew a guy that basically ended his high school career basically because of that. And just to think that you played through that, that's impressive. I mean, that's no short feat to deal with that pain and to still play at a high level.
Yeah, for sure testing me.
Yeah, definitely. We were talking about a lot of things where, you were tested. You got to be the leader out there. People are looking at you. All eyes are on you. You're in the game every single pitch. You're throwing just as much as the pitcher, maybe not as fast, but you're throwing the ball back to the pitcher just about every single pitch unless it's hit. I'm curious, like mindset for a catcher before we wind out of college softball here. Mindset for a catcher going into it. How do you get yourself prepared for that to get in the right mindset to basically be at your best? I guess Tyler sort of asked a question like that, but the reason I'm asking this is because I watched some fantastic baseball down in Myrtle Beach this weekend, and I'm just curious, like, what was one of your favorite things to do? Was it throw out people at second base? Was it the throw behind pickoff at first base? What were some of those things that you loved, but what got you in that mindset to do it? Tough question. I'm sorry.
No, all good. Probably picking off people. That was my favorite thing. Get me fired up. The mindset is I don't want this girl to get another bag. She's not going to get another bag on me. I mean, not getting in the scoring position, whatever I can do to prevent that, I'm going to do it.
I know I was in a roundabout a way of asking that question, but you answered it exactly the way I wanted you to. Thank you.
Now let's talk about, getting out of college and transitioning now into the working world. Looking back, would you have done anything differently, whether it be, into the recruiting process to get to college? Would you have went and visited other schools? Would you have studied anything different? Would there have been anything different those 4 years at Hendrix that you would have done?
If you would have asked me this in August, I would have said not taking myself so seriously. I was one who as soon as I knew I wanted to be a strength coach, I found every internship possible. And so because of that, I never had a true summer to myself. I was always working, always doing something. So kind of just wanted to take myself less serious and be a kid. But now that I am where I am, I wouldn't have gotten here without doing that. So I know that was the exact path that I needed to take.
Now, for our listeners who may not know or may not be following you yet on social media, can you tell them what you're currently doing now and what got you into it?
So I'm currently the director of strength and conditioning for S2 Breakthrough. We are a softball training facility in Orland Park, Illinois. I got into this journey because of my passion to better myself as a softball player, diving into the knowledge with strength and conditioning, basically to reap every ounce of my untapped potential as a player.
Well, just to cut in, it must be a passion, because if you went from Texas weather to Illinois, I mean, it's got to be a passion, right?
Oh yeah, for sure.
But why Illinois? Like, how did that happen? Like that, because I mean, you were in Texas, and you lived out there, and you played out, you grew up there. What made Illinois stick?
So I graduated college. I moved to the Northeast for a brief period of time, did an internship there for strength and conditioning. And in that time, Krista Stoker, who is a co-owner of S2, found me on Twitter and started DMing me like, hey, would you be interested in being a strength coach here? We started texting, started talking it out. Then I did an interview with them. So at that point, I don't even know where Orland Park is. I've never been to Chicago. And my gut tells me, take the job, go. I mean, get up and go. This is what you've been waiting for. Like, when your dream job smacks you in the face, you just have to go. And so I knew nothing about Illinois. I knew nothing about Chicago. I got in my car at the end of July, drove the 14 hours here, and have called it home ever since.
Hey, you got to chase your dreams. You can't be afraid to put stuff out there and go get them, right?
Yes, sir.
What has been the biggest challenge going from player to coach, sort of speak? Now that you're doing strength and conditioning, you're mentoring, you're doing those things. What's been the biggest challenge now that the game is kind of in the rear view and you're focused on getting players better on the field?
I think the biggest challenge is just knowing how to speak to each individual kid. For me, it really didn't take much to get a fire lit under me, especially in the weight room. I got there, head down, get the work done. But for other kids, it doesn't come that easy. So getting to know them as an individual and know their story really helps with motivation and getting them to breed the best culture they can.
Earlier in the interview, we asked a question. You were talking about high school and separating school and playing, and you had mentioned even in high school you were talking about getting your lifting in. And I can tell you right now, when I was playing high school baseball and high school football, we had lifting in the summertime and we had lifting in the off season. And unless the coach said you had to be there, it was up to you. And I think that's so cool, because like looking back now, and you just got out of college, looking back now, I keep telling myself, I wish I would have just gone. I wish I would have gone all those days in the summer. I should have gotten ready for football. I should have gotten ready for baseball earlier. What is something? Do you think that's what is lacking most in high school sports? Do you think people aren't about that most, or is it nutrition maybe? Because you're living under mom and dad's roof. Whatever they put in the pantry is what you eat. Like, what is some of the things that these kids these days you think are lacking more in one area than they are in the other?
I think it's a little bit of both, honestly. If you could pinpoint one thing to get both, it's structure for sure. Setting up those times and giving them that time to lift, because if you don't give them the time to lift, odds are they're not going to find it themselves. I mean, I have kids coming in who tell me they don't sleep because they have so much homework to do. I'm just sitting there thinking, I mean, you have 24 hours and you can't find time to do homework to where you're not sleeping only 3 hours. And nutrition falls right under that too. I mean, they're under mom and dad's roof. So if all they have is Cheetos and PB&Js to eat, then that's what they're going to eat. So for a while, I was getting onto my kids about nutrition, and I wheeled back some, just said, I can't get onto these kids unless I teach them how to do it. So the ones who were interested, I talked to them about it and kind of showed them how to do it.
I would say that that's probably always kind of been like a hindrance maybe in the softball game, is the nutritional side, like at the field between games. Even baseball kind of has the issue as well, when you're at these tournaments and you're playing 3, 4, 5 games and you're there for 12 hours and they're selling all this crap at the concession stand, and none of it's really designed for an athlete. It's for the parents sitting in the chairs. What would be some of the suggestions for food and snacks that you would tell players to take along to some of these tournaments when you're gone for 8, 10, 12 hours in a day?
PB&J's, simple and effective. Load the peanut butter and load the jelly, whole wheat, and pack on the fruit. If I don't have fruit after workout, it's fruit snacks, just simple stuff like that. You don't have to complicate it to where it's so healthy, but just simple stuff.
I think that's the problem. I think most people try to overcomplicate it and they think, oh, I guess I got to eat just salads and things like that. But when you're an athlete, I mean, you do need other things that, if you were just stagnant sitting on a couch, that, would probably not be the best thing for you. But if you're an athlete moving around, I mean, it's definitely a different thing. That's why if you look at, a college player, what calories they need for intake, because all the workouts they're doing compared to calories that I need at 36 years old, they're not the same. So, that's something to look at too. But at the same time, when I'm saying that, when people are listening to this right now, I don't mean, hey, put the entire fridge in your mouth. It's okay because you play a sport. That's not what I mean. But, it's just feed your body what it needs for fuel, basically, is what I'm trying to say.
Exactly.
So you talked about, you were lifting in high school, and now you're focusing primarily on that, with the students that you're training and the athletes that you're training. When do you think is a good time? And we get different responses on this. That's why I keep asking it. When do you think is a good time for, an athlete to start thinking about resistance and strength training? Because we've heard it when we were growing up. It was like, oh, you don't lift weights until after you hit puberty because it'll stunt your growth. Well, I'm 6'3". That didn't work out. So I'm just curious, what's your mindset behind there and the perfect time to start doing that?
I think 13 up, just to give it age range, but really it's all about puberty and developmental age. So we start lifting truly around 14 here. And besides that, all the younger kids are working ground up just on fundamental stuff, skipping, shuffling, running.
Now, one thing I want to ask, because so many people are lift, like got to get stronger. But I think what gets lost in that is the mobility side of it. Everybody's squat, deadlift, box jumps, things of that nature, bench press, arm curls, just the standard get stronger. But how much focus should we put on mobility training and flexibility and things like that?
A lot, especially with the older kids. So my high school kids are the ones who I struggle with the most mobility wise. They're the kids who they've been playing softball probably since about 10. They've been overhead most of their life. They don't really get a break. So mobility issues are through the roof. They're sitting all day at school. So right off the bat, I know hip mobility is probably an issue. I know upper back mobility is probably an issue. So all through their warm up is tailored to being an overhead athlete and sitting in school all day.
You say overhead athlete. You're the first person who's ever brought that up. Can you explain that to me and also for people listening? I know what you're talking about, but just clarify what you mean.
So overhead athlete, volleyball players, softball players, baseball players, just any sport really that lives overhead. Even swimmers, I guess you could classify as well.
Well, and today we got something different than when Tyler and I were in school. There's something where like people's postures are horrible because they're staring at their phones all day.
Exactly.
So I mean, I don't really know how I'm going to ask this question, but like, what are some of the things, for example, like because you got kids sitting in chairs, so that's the hip and the back and all that stuff. What are some of the things that you recommend, for stretching? It might be hard to talk about on a podcast, but stretching before a practice to really kind of open up, your mobility, so you're able to do what your body is designed to do that you've been neglecting all day long.
Right. So first thing with sitting all day long, I have our kids do, we call them 90-90 hip flows. So basically get those hips opened up, gets the hips into both internal, external rotation. And what I like about it is it's not passive, it's active. They have to get there themselves and kind of work their way through it. For most kids, it's a struggle, which I like to see because then I know they're working through that mobility. Something for the upper back we do a lot and I live by is sideline T rotations, which kids are on their sides, big reaching out and then reaching back across them just to stretch out that upper back because I know most of them are tight all day or they live with traps in their ears from playing softball.
Now you have videos on your website with these stretches that like what you do to get warmed up?
We do have them on our YouTube. Yes, sir.
Awesome.
On SQ Breakthrough.
Now, really quick, can you explain to the casual dad out there, mom, coach, first-year coach, the difference between active and passive? Because I don't think everybody has a firm understanding of the difference, and some may not even have a clue the difference. But if you could just explain that piece so that people have a better idea of what you're talking about.
So active range of motion is when the athlete has to get them there themselves. So making them work through a 90-90 hip flow, which is one of the mobility things, is forcing them to actively move their hips in and out. Passive range of motion with that would be holding their hips and moving it yourself. So guiding the athlete through that range of motion.
Fantastic. Thank you. Because like I said, there's definitely a difference and they both have a purpose. I just don't know if people know exactly what the difference between the two is and how which ones you use to achieve certain goals.
Karli, I got a question for you. And I love this question because we get a different answer all the time. The game of softball. What is a lesson that softball has taught you that you use in your everyday life? And I'm not even talking about with training either, not even just training or playing the sport, but just in your everyday life. What is something you learned from the game that you still use?
Ooh, that's a good one. Could probably summarize that in a quote. So show up, do the work. It doesn't matter what happens, doesn't matter the outcome, just show up and do whatever it takes to get the job done. Whether that means you just struck out, you're having a bad day, show up and put in the work. I know majority of my softball career, I was fighting for another day of softball. I didn't think I was going to make it to be a college softball player, and that killed me for the longest time. So fighting for another day of softball really taught me a lot about myself and my work ethic.
Follow-up question to that. Was there a piece of advice that you got during your career that you wish you would have gotten earlier?
Ooh, my college softball coach always told me, be where your feet are. Don't worry about anything else. Just be where your feet are. The next at bat, the next throw, it'll come to you. Just stay right here.
So is that kind of a different way of saying, stay present?
Yes, sir. Exactly.
Awesome.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's good advice.
One thing I want to ask, and I wasn't sure if you had any, and I'm sure you're big into research and studying. You're in a constant state of learning, which I think a lot of people.
She was pre-med, absolutely.
I know. I just think, but I think the baseball side of it is very close-minded. I think this is the way I've always done it. This is the way we're always going to do it. This is my way. There's no other way. Da 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 da. I think the softball community is very more open-minded. Lots of new information flying into the game very rapidly in the past 5 years, 10 years from where it was at. Is there any great information out there that you would point people to, whether it be a book, website, something like that, that you would recommend for people to go out and do some research on their own to dig a little deeper into some of these topics we've been talking about?
Anything by Eric Cressy. He's my go-to on almost everything. Mike Boyle, I just finished his new functional training for sports book, and it was an awesome read. Very helpful for building athletes from the ground up, which is what we're all about here, and branching out progressions, which I loved.
Can you say the last name one more time?
Mike Boyle.
Oh, okay. Got it. before we move on to our last few questions, was there anything that we didn't touch on? I know we've asked tons of questions. We're kind of all over the place. Excuse me, all over the place. Was there anything that we didn't bring up that you wanted to touch on or speak on to our listeners? Because we got young listeners that tune in every week when we have a podcast. We have coaches, we have parents. Is there anything you wanted to touch on?
Nothing I can think of. I think you all covered it.
Now, you kind of said don't take yourself so seriously, but if you could go back and tell your teenage self, anything about, what the next 10 to 15 years of life might look like, what would you tell yourself possibly to do different, to focus on more, or anything different, or just go with the flow and be where your feet are?
I would say probably exactly that. Go with the flow, be where your feet are, and just enjoy the ride. I mean, that's really what it's about, is enjoying the journey.
And I'm a Philadelphia sports fan, so you always hear about trust the process, enjoy the process, things like that in the Philly realm. But if you really break it down, you'll hear about the pursuit of happiness. Like that is the joy in doing all of this, because if you're not paying attention while it's all happening, you just wasted how many years of whatever you did. Exactly. I'm sure you agree with me on that. But that's an excellent answer.
One thing I want to ask you about is when it comes to strength and conditioning training, how important is the environment that you enter in? You know what I mean? Because you could take like my daughter, she does softball, and just recently in the past year got into doing like full on MMA training. And she's 11 going on 12, and people are like, oh, she's in a fight. It's not a fight club. Like they're hitting mitts, they're hitting bags. They're not beating on each other. But it's the environment that the coach there, the trainers have created that, people on the outside or take their kids there understand it, but people that you tell don't really get it. But it seemed kind of in a strength and conditioning world. Like, what is that? How important is environment and culture in the building when the athletes come in?
Oh, the environment and culture is everything. It breeds results, that's for sure. I remember in August, it was so different. I came from working with baseball players to working with softball players, and I was just like, these girls are timid to put on weights. I mean, how do I get these girls stacking on weights when I know they can do so much more? And then it was right before I went home for the holidays in December. I remember we had girls throwing on weight. We had girls talking smack to each other, like, hey, I'm coming for your deadlift PR, or like, hey, I'm doing this. And I was just like, this is awesome. This is what it's about.
And that translates to the field, right? I mean, because that's what you do in the dugout. That's what you do at practice to really get so I mean, that's awesome that you said that, because that's a transferable skill from weight room to the field.
Yes, sir.
Now, one thing I want to ask you too is, can you walk us through what the typical experience would be like for the brand new athlete walking in off the street? We heard this interview. We love what you're doing. We want to come train with you. Where would you start? And what would be the first, session, 2-3 sessions be like moving forward with that athlete?
And is this one-on-one, or is this online, or both?
It can be one-on-one, or it can be online. We just really got started with our remote clientele. So if you're new, you come in for an assessment, and we do our threshold assessment. We get all that information on you, strength and conditioning and skill work, review it as a team, and then write a performance plan for you tailored to your individual needs with your ratio of skill work to strength work. And from there, we build out, if you need an individual warm-up for movement deficiencies, we build that out. And from there on, you come in on your first day to train, and we work together one-on-one through the warm-up, and then I observe your strength training, and then you go to skill work.
So for someone that's doing it online, do they need to have the bar in front of them with the weights, or can they practice with a broomstick just to get the right posture and the right form?
Typically, we have our remote clients actually going to other strength coaches, and the program that we give them kind of complements what they're doing, or they do it with their strength coach.
Okay, gotcha. It's good to know, because I was wondering about how that, like, do they set it up in their gym? Do they set up a camera with you? Or I wasn't sure how that worked out.
Yes, sir.
What would be the biggest piece of advice you could give players, parents, or coaches about what you're doing?
It's a holistic approach to be the best softball player you can be. And if you're willing to find out how good you can be, then tap into absolutely everything there is to tap into. The skill work, the drills, the strength training, it's all needed, and it's all needed in a certain amount. That's one thing that I think softball doesn't understand quite yet, is there's a need of drill work, but it's to complement strength work. And then there's an aspect where there's needed strength work, but it's to complement drill work.
That's awesome. Now, I'd love to know your goals here for the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, whether it be for what you're doing now, or do you plan to do something on your own down the road, or is there a pipe dream of playing softball again? Like, what are some of your goals that you can throw them out there? We'd just love to hear about those.
Probably keep growing S2 as much as it can grow. It's been an awesome ride just in the 6 months that I've been here. So I'd love to keep that going, and just to see how many softball players we can continue to empower.
That's excellent. Awesome. We love asking this question because with our podcast, when Tyler and I started this, we thought we're just going to talk about some baseball, Major League Baseball. And then we started interviewing people, and it really connected the dots for people that were listening, because there's a lot of young players, young coaches, parents that are listening to this. They're trying to direct themselves or their child in the right direction. So we like to get good guests on with good stories that could lead them to that path. With that being said, if there was anyone that you could recommend for us to have on our show, who would that person be?
Probably Mike Lateef, without a doubt.
Mike Lateef?
Why would you choose him?
He's a man of softball. He knows it all, and the success he's been able to create, I think, is a true testament of it.
Excellent.
Awesome. Karli, for those who have been listening to this, is there, where can people find you online, whether it be on social media, website, YouTube channel? Can you just give the rundown and list where everybody can find all the information to follow along with what you're doing or to get a hold of you?
So on Twitter, it's Karli L. Sewell. And then on Instagram, it's Karli_Sewell. And then also you can find more information in my email at s2breakthrough.com.
Excellent. Karli, we really appreciate you coming on. We got one more question for you. This is one of my favorite questions. I'm a musician, and Tyler and I are both into music. We listen to music, same music. We introduce each other to different music all the time, and I feel like music really tells a lot about the person. So if you had one at bat in the 2020 Olympics, what song would you choose as your walk-up song to the plate?
Probably The Nights by Avicii.
And why that song?
Just symbolizes the journey that it takes to get there, and the journey of life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Love that answer. Karli, we appreciate everything you've given